we got to talk about this eclipse again, this October 25th, 2022 eclipse. We see this eclipse in Scorpio. This is within 1 degree of the Pluto return. So the US is about to go through another Pluto return in December. And then we have this very powerful lunar eclipse on the day of the US midterm elections. Okay, we've been talking about that. We'll talk more about it, a lot more about it. And the fact that during this eclipse, we have Jupiter on the world point. We'll talk about that as well. That's very important. There's some astrologers would say, oh, just the fact, forget about what's going on in the world. The fact that we have a very powerful eclipse pattern that's occurring at the same time that Jupiter is on the world point would mean that there would be some tour de force event about to play out between the time of the 25th and November 8th of 2022. And again, as we know, eclipses are warning signals that there are unknown factors in the offing or state of affairs that will erupt in unexpected ways, causing both dramatic and unanticipated developments well after the event. So this correlates with the black swan twilight zone. When you combine it with Pluto, you are in the realm of the black swan. Now, this eclipse path, look where it is. It covers all of Europe, particularly Russia. And look where it's covering with its great intensity, right over here. Again, folks, note that Uranus line, right? Right along the border of Finland, going through Ukraine, going through Moldova, going through the Black Sea, going right through here. Look at that Pluto line, right through here in Turkey. If you look at the world conflict map from defconlevel.com, this is the current world conflict map involving war, civil war, heavy conflict, moderate conflict, light conflict. If you compare that, look at the action that's here, look what's happening here, right? You can see this whole area here is going to go from, right, yellow, orange to red. We're going to see more red pop up. Now keep this in mind. So this is retrocausality. So probably I'll have to do a whole presentation on retrocausality, but here's the gist of it, that the future is informing the present. There's so much evidence based on remote viewing, CIA sponsored at Stanford Institute remote viewing program, that the future, we don't know this, we don't have a current level of physics that can explain it, but we have the evidence, we have the statistical evidence that proves this out. And this is where we know at least the future has already happened. How far in the future, we don't know, but we know that the future in certain things, in certain ways for all of us, has already been played out. And that, right, as we get closer and closer to that future, we have more free choice as we approach it. But the big things, right, the things that form and shape our reality have already been sort of laid out ahead of time. And so if you look at the retrocausality factor, which is what I'm focusing on now, and saying, okay, well, the eclipse 2022, people would say, well, there's going to be a big war in October 25th, 2022, right? That would be the way most astrologists would look at something and say, well, you know, something's going to happen in October, but something's already happened. And what I'm getting at here is that what's happening between late October and early November is triggered what's happening now, meaning what's happening now is going to lead to what is happening in Europe, in Russia, in the Middle East, in Turkey, right, in the Mediterranean, in North Africa, even into India. Look at this. It's pulling all of these countries in. So what's happening in the future is triggered what's already playing out right now. That's retrocausality. But you have to understand that you are not above retrocausality. There are decisions that you've made in the future that are going to affect what you're going to decide right now, even though in the moment you'll think you made that decision right off the cuff. It was just a decision you made, but no, it was about something that needed to happen, that was going to happen in the future, that got you to make a decision now, to make a choice on something. So, but you are not conscious of it. Retrocausality affects things at the unconscious level, not at the unconscious level. And as we know, the unconscious is 90% of our consciousness. So if you look at the time of when Russia attacked Ukraine, formal declaration of war, and it attacked Ukraine simultaneously, we look at this astrocartography map of this horoscope. We note what? Note that Pluto is going right over Washington, D.C. Look at that. Pluto is moving right over D.C. Well, very close to D.C., right? It's very close to D.C. And then you've got this Venus-Mars conjunction very close to Pluto. So this is, right, impacting this whole area. And note here that this Venus-Mars-Pluto is also impacting directly right over here in this, where Odessa is, where Romania is, where Turkey is. It's the Black Sea. Note the Black Sea here, that whole Black Sea area. And you could see Kharkov, right, the big battle that's taking place. So here's the thing. US is going through a Pluto return, right? The Pluto return correlated exactly when Russia attacked Ukraine. Using this chart, Pluto goes right over Washington or close to it, within miles of it. As we see here, we have the Pluto return, right? It's 4 days prior. So it's actually 4 days prior. So this is the first of 3 returns. And by the way, as you know, the Pluto return, the first of 3, the astrocartography goes right over where? Right over Ukraine. See the connection there? So this is Russia, right? This is Russia declaring war on Ukraine. The astrocartography of that event goes right over Washington. That correlates with the activation, right? The activation of that transit is correlating with this triple conjunction on the US Pluto going through its return, and the Pluto return is going right over here again to, it's like a double whammy. And that's why I keep saying, remember, what happens to America affects you no matter what country you live in. When the US sneezes, the world gets a cold. When the US gets a cold, the world gets pneumonia. And when the US is in critical condition, the world is in or on emergency life support. So we have the US Pluto return. First one happened in February. The second one, the second of 3, occurs on July 11th. July 11th. And that's the time when transiting Saturn will be on the moon. That's not a fun period. This is not going to be the summer of love. Let's put it that way. I'll have a lot more to say about that Saturn moon, but that would indicate that people are not feeling happy. They're not going to be happy campers. America is Saturn moon could also indicate one of the manifestations is economic depravity and fear. People really living in fear. People sensing that their leadership has lost control, that their leadership has lost control at the time of the 4th of July. People are not going to feel very patriotic because they feel good about their country. And then US Pluto return December 28th, 2022. That's 3 of 3. 3 of 3. So what's going on here? If we look here, right, between the 2nd of 3 Pluto returns, we have that very tight, we have this Saturn-Uranus aspect still within effective orb, right? Then we have the Saturn-Uranus still in aspect. So the Saturn-Uranus is going to be hitting the moon, Saturn directly hitting it during that second Pluto return, and very close to it again.
The full presentation of this webinar is available in the Global Transformation Astrology membership at gta.williamstickevers.com.